I've always found it rather strange how underrepresented SF4 is in terms of SF6's roster. For how popular that game is, not to mention the part it played in getting so many current FGC figureheads into the community in the first place, you'd think Capcom would capitalize on it by filling the roster with a lot of fan favorites from that game in the newest SF game. I know it's more profitable to sell them as DLC, but even after 2 character passes, we still have no traces of Viper, or Hakan, or Seth, or Rufus. God knows I'm not the kind of person to make DLC wishlists, but please Capcom, bring Rufus back. In fact, at the time I'm writing this, there's only one SF4 character on the entire 25 character roster of Street Fighter 6, Juri Han. Juri made her debut back in the Street Fighter 4 days and hasn't missed a game since, becoming quite popular for what I can only assume is that vibrant personality Capcom loves to flaunt and use in their marketing. Kinda wild, to be honest. As someone who only played Street Fighter 4 and 5 retroactively after learning 6, I was always curious because a common sentiment I saw about Juri was people expressing dissatisfaction with the way she was designed in 6 and 5 compared to her original appearance. I have to admit, as someone who finds Juri to be quite fun in SF6, I was curious. So today, let's take a trip through the history of Juri and see how she's evolved since her debut. Juri, as mentioned before, made her debut in Super Street Fighter 4, which is kind of a surprise to me. I always assumed she was base roster for some reason. Juri is, if I'm not mistaken, the series' first fighter to hail from South Korea, touting Taekwondo as a fighting style and a design that, funnily enough, was inspired by Jolene Kujo from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. I can't find anything explicitly confirming this, but the resemblance in their outfits is pretty telling, plus she's far from the only SF fighter to be inspired by JoJo. Anyway, Juri here has a moveset that is surprisingly unorthodox. Right off the bat, her forward dash is incredibly fast and also lowers her hurtbox to the point of being able to duck under some buttons. On the other hand, her walk speed is comparable to that of a turtle's. It's so goddamn slow, especially in her debut in Super. Her main mechanic is the Fuhajin, which allows her to throw fireballs. Chucking plasma isn't exactly a rare skill in this series, and God forbid not in SF4, so what makes Juri so unique? Well, the Fuhajin is no regular fireball. What makes it distinct is Juri's ability to store the projectile, so to speak. If you do the input normally, Juri will kick her leg up and then shoot the fireball, but if you hold the kick button down, Juri will do the first part of the animation, but will not fire the projectile until the button is released. Thus, storing the fireballs makes use of a technique called negative edging, since you have to be holding down a button. As far as the projectile itself, it's got some interesting properties of its own, with the light, medium, and heavy versions traveling in different paths. The light version travels along the ground, and the heavy version goes up at a diagonal angle. The advantages of being able to store a fireball are clear, as she's able to keep people guessing since she can constantly threaten the release of a fireball in order to control how the opponent plays neutral against her. With how fast her movement is thanks to her dashes, it gives Juri the ability to control the pace of a match very effectively. The fireball itself also makes for a good pressure tool, and she can combo after it as well, sometimes without meter to score extra damage after a release. Juri can use the fireball as a more conventional method of space control, but compared to a fireball from Guile or most Shotos, Juri's don't have the best range or fastest startup, which can make it hard to keep up in fireball wars on the basis of her projectiles alone. On the other hand, the store does destroy projectiles, and the light fireball can slip under other projectiles, potentially earning Juri damage from a trade. It's also worth mentioning that Juri is able to have multiple Fuha fireballs on screen at once, a stark contrast from most other fireball characters. The EX version of Fuhajin cannot be stored and will immediately throw the fireball once used. Besides Fuhajin, Juri has a dive kick, which is a good anti-fireball tool in its own right thanks to the range and the angle it flies. After the initial hit, Juri can perform 2 follow-ups, not so cleverly titled Second Impact and Third Strike, which score a knockdown on hit. She has a counter which works on fireballs and strikes. Rather than an attack of any sorts, the counter will instead trigger a dash forward, backward, or directly up depending on the button used. It's a pretty solid defensive option considering it costs no bar. And then, of course, there's the pinwheel, her main combo ender with the EX version acting as an invincible reversal. Her super is pretty unspectacular, as are most SF4 supers, so let's get into her ultra combos. Juri was added in Super Street Fighter 4, and just like every post-vanilla character, she launched with 2 ultras. Her second ultra is a fairly standard strike that leads into a cinematic, but Ultra 1 is really the main talking point here. Rather than any kind of direct attack, Feng Shui Engine is an install that Juri can pop to power herself up for a limited amount of time. More specifically, FSC allows Juri the ability to chain her normals together, sort of like the chain combos in Darkstalkers. In this state, Juri gains access to long pressure strings and mix-up sequences, since being in FSC allows her to combo off her overhead and combo into her sweep. These let Juri net solid damage from combos and gamble for even more damage through resets with her overhead. It also increases the speed of her dashes, so her already strong mobility becomes even better. As it doesn't do conventional damage, the amount of meter in the revenge gauge instead affects FSC's timer, with more meter giving her a longer amount of time in the mode. There's a variety of factors that goes into choosing ultras for many characters in SF4, and especially so for Juri, given just how unique her Ultra 1 is. FSC is very strong, but if the opponent is able to block your mix-ups, then the activation kinda ends up being a waste as you're no closer to actually winning a round. This is in stark contrast to Ultra 2, which was just a standard combo ender that, while not as flashy, would net her guaranteed damage when she landed it. However, in saying that, Ultra 2 setups were often either difficult to land or very expensive, mainly because of the vertical angle that the move flies up at. You could do stuff like EX focus cancels off fireballs and EX dive kick juggles work too, but these were still a little awkward. At the end of the day, which one she chose all came down to matchup preference. The addition of Ultra Combo Double later in SF4's lifespan did slightly amend this, as you would have access to both Ultras, but with the downside of reduced damage. I have to say, it's pretty odd to witness this version of Juri where she's more focused on the fireballs than anything else, with genuinely strong keep away capabilities. Juri doing any kind of zoning is definitely a surreal sight for me as an SF6 Juri player, I can tell you that much. I admire the inventive nature of her design, especially as a fireball character, but there are obvious issues brought on by that unique gameplay. Having to negative edge just to keep fireballs stored not only made her very awkward to play, but also created an issue similar to other hold special moves like Balrog's tap. That is, by keeping a fireball stored, you're giving up at least one of your buttons. Since Fuhajin uses kicks, it means giving up great pokes like stand heavy kick and crouch medium kick depending on the fireballs you have stored, not to mention throws and focus attacks, although you could somewhat get around that by using macros. Anytime you have Fuha stored, you're drastically changing the way you play, which makes aspects of her game plan a little inconsistent. She also had low health. 950 isn't the absolute worst in the game, but it's still below average in the scope of the entire cast. Not having a meterless reversal wasn't great either, but she does have EX pinwheels, so it's not all bad. As far as viability is concerned, she was a pretty capable character. It's kinda hard to research for her debut because Super Street Fighter 4 wasn't out for that long before updates like Arcade Edition dropped, although, with the patch notes for AE and beyond being full of buffs for her walk speed, damage, buttons, ultras, and a bunch of other stuff, not terribly hard to imagine. Still, by Ultra she had improved to the point of being damn good in her own right and had amassed pretty decent representation in tournaments. You'd occasionally see players like Momochi switch to her. There was Saix Hinata and ASAP Rabito, Kraymore and Yosan, Aliun, and of course, Ai, who got top 8 at EVO 2015 in Ultra SF4. Not too bad. Knowing now what I know about SF4 Juri, I definitely understand why I've seen more than a few instances of people avoiding her because of her playstyle. Difficult combos is one thing, but between the negative edge fireballs, the abstract nature of FSC, and her game plan and win condition being less defined than other characters, not hard to see why some people found her a little too tricky to play. Despite this, she was popular enough to linger around after SF4, but Capcom clearly knew that they had made a character that wasn't easily approachable by people who she had appealed to with her design and personality, something they certainly kept in mind for the next game. Considering how easy it is to find people echoing the idea that they avoided playing Juri because of her finicky and difficult kit, it's understandable for Capcom to want to change her going forward, seeing as she was definitely quite popular by this point. Thus, we have SF5 Juri, where a large number of changes were made to the character, for better or for worse. Juri released as one of the DLC characters in Year 1, with a new design that I actually kinda like, although I do prefer the SF4 look. Juri here is in many respects a completely different character with a largely restructured game plan. Here's the gist. Fuhajin is completely gone. I mean that literally, it's been entirely taken away, so no more fireball stalking. Well, okay, that's a bit deceptive, because instead of just removing it, they opted to replace it with a new special that carries on the idea of storing special moves, but with vastly different execution. If you'll recall, Fuhajin on activation threw a fireball at one of 3 different ranges, and by holding down a button, Juri could store the fireball and choose when to release it. In SF5, we have something different, a new move called Fuha Renkyaku. Juri now has 3 different special moves, each tied to the Fuha Renkyaku input. The light version is a fireball, which is similar to the light Fuhajin fireball from SF4 in that it travels slowly along the ground. Like in SF4, Juri can follow behind it, use it for her pressure, and net a combo if it hits, and it still low profiles other projectiles. It does a great job of acting as a major obstacle for the opponent, coaxing them into jumping for an easy anti-air or stifling their approach. For medium and heavy Fuha Renkyaku, we have 2 new special moves. Medium is an axe kick that acts primarily as a combo extender, while the heavy version is a spin kick that travels forward and knocks down, making it a great ender. So, 3 new special moves is great and all, but how is this anything like Fuhajin? Well, let's get into that. Before Juri gains access to any of these 3 specials, she first has to use Fuha Renkyaku to store them. It goes like this. Let's say you want to use her fireball. Doing the light Fuha input will first store the fireball. Now that you have it stored, doing it again will throw the fireball. Now that you've used it, you'll have to do the move again to store it again, and so on and so forth. It works the same for the axe kick and the spin kick. Juri can also chain these 3 specials together, sort of making it like a pseudo-Rekka. Oh yeah, and the EX version of the Fuha Renkyaku has no store associated with it. It's the same attack every time regardless of stores. Whether these moves are stored or not is handily communicated to you via the little icons next to her V meter. The most important change in regards to this new system is that Juri no longer needs negative edge to store these moves. There's no button holding at all. You can simply perform the Fuha input and the corresponding special is stored until you expend it. Certainly, removing the need to nedge for Juri made her a lot less awkward to use. Her other 2 specials are a new flip kick that hops over fireballs and cancels into her super, and the classic pinwheel. While the light pinwheel looks basically the same as the SF4 version, and she still uses EX pinwheel as her invincible reversal, the medium and heavy versions travel directly upward, which effectively gives her access to an anti-air DP. The counter and the dive kick from 4 are completely gone. Tragic. There's a large amount of gameplay implications to the restructuring of the Fuha mechanic. The obvious one is, of course, the fact that she's a lot less projectile focused here. In 5, she can only store a single fireball which travels at one single speed and range, compared to 4 where she could toss out multiple different fireballs at different angles and vary up the speed. Zoning isn't impossible for Juri in 5 as there are matchups that let her stalk and then throw fireballs at a suitably fast pace for decent keep away, but against aggressive opponents or characters who can close the gap easily is a different story and requires a shift in playstyle, especially because of the strong amount of anti-fireball tools in 5, exemplified by some of Juri's own moves. Thankfully, she can function in neutral without the fireball. She has great footsies, owing mostly to her myriad of strong pokes and walk speed, a major improvement over SF4 where she walked like her feet were stuck in molasses. The fireball itself is still great as an approach tool as well. So, once again, she's pretty versatile in terms of her overall goals, but the mechanics of how she uses her resources definitely stand out too. Juri's release specials have highly specific utilities tied to them, so the way she uses each of them is much different from the Fuhajin fireballs in 4. As a result, playing Juri becomes a game of keeping track of when you're able to get your stores and when to use the releases, which means what kind of combos you do, whether you go for Oki or sacrifice it for more stores, and other aspects of her game plan change radically based on whether you have stores or not. Fuha Renkyaku is pretty fast, so with some distance you can occasionally sneak in a store during the neutral, but again, an aggressive opponent isn't going to let you do this for free, let alone for 3 entire stocks. Despite the simplification of her execution, both as a result of the elimination of hard links in SF5 universally and the removal of her negative edge inputs, she's still one of the more difficult characters to play because of how open-ended this resource management makes her. The defining mechanic of SF5 is the V system, granting Juri a V skill and a V trigger to inflict more of that pain she loves. Her V skill 1 is a chargeable dash that goes through fireballs. The charge can be stored, by cancelling the animation with a regular dash. Pretty handy tool. Kinda wish she had this in 6. V skill 2 on the other hand lets her create her own projectile, this little spinny set play disc. The first use of VS2 will store it and the second will release it. It's normally -2, but with the right timing you can hit it media and make it super plus on block, which is great for wake up pressure. Her V-Trigger 1 is the classic Feng Shui engine, although since both of her triggers share this name, VT1 is labeled Alpha and VT2 is labeled Beta. VT1 works basically the same as it does in SF4, letting Juri cancel her normals into each other, although it has the secondary effect of allowing Juri to use all of her Fuha release specials without needing to store them, albeit at the cost of draining the V meter each time. V-Trigger 2 is a bit more interesting. Upon activating it, Juri creates a small disc at her feet. Two major effects here. The significantly more mundane first one is that she immediately receives all three of her stores. The second is that while the opponent is grounded and in the radius of the disc, it drains their super meter while filling Juri's. And it drains a lot of meter, almost emptying an entire 3 bars within its full duration. The obvious issue is that the meter draining only occurs when both Juri and the opponent are grounded, and characters in this game get meter back when they get hit, which means a lot of her normal combo routes would prevent the actual effect from taking place since they'd send the opponent into the air or cause them to build back the meter they were losing. It does restand the opponent on hit if they're in the air, which puts them back on the ground, and that helps a little bit, but after that the effect was hardly noticeable. Combined with V-Trigger 1 providing the ability to spam the Fuha release specials and granting more consistent combo conversions, VT1 was considered pretty bad on release, although they did buff it a ton in later versions. Not being able to V-reversal the initial activation went a long way in improving it, and VT2 also got a lot of changes to increase the cancel options into it and the amount of combos she can do that would let her drain her opponent more. VT1 was still the more common pick though. Hey, speaking of starting off bad and receiving tons of buffs after the fact, this character launched in a pretty miserable state, with most Season 1 tier lists putting her near the bottom. There was shit like Pinwheel being done with kicks instead of punches, which led to major input overlap with the stores. You would walk forward and then try to store and just end up getting a Pinwheel instead, resulting in an easy punish for the opponent. Her frame data was significantly worse, resulting in staple Juri combos like stand medium punch into crouch medium punch or crouch medium kick not working. Her super just didn't break armor for some reason. V-Trigger 1 for a long time was a 3-bar trigger, which meant it took longer to fill the entire V meter. Since her V skill was one you couldn't just throw out in neutral to build V meter, it meant this below average health character had to lose tons of her already low health to gain access to this trigger consistently. Her Fuha release specials were more unsafe on block and had less utility, and in general, she struggled to confirm into meaningful damage, which made her a lot more reliant on stores that incidentally she had a way harder time gathering. Incomplete is the way a lot of people describe her, and I'm sure the large changes made to her moveset from SF4 didn't help at all. Well, despite this awful start, she got a slew of buffs across most of the SF5 patches, giving her access to better confirms, making stocks easier to gather, and improving her frame data on hit and block tremendously. So by the end, she was legitimately strong, but the changes made to her moveset with the new release moves and the removal of the negative edge created an interesting divide between people who preferred her gameplay in SF4 and those who liked the SF5 version, although from what I've seen personally, the former are definitely more common. Given how popular she was, bringing her back to Street Fighter 6 was a no-brainer, so how would Capcom decide to move forward with her this time? Well, putting their best foot forward, I think it was obvious they wanted to at least try to satisfy the groups of people who preferred her in either game. Her default design calls back to SF4's, but she does have the SF5 jumpsuit as an alternate, along with a third costume which is objectively the best one, and if you disagree, you're factually wrong. Anyway, Juri in SF6 is, as I mentioned at the beginning, the only piece of SF4 representation in the main roster of SF6 at this point. This is the version of Juri I'm the most familiar with, and I really do like this character a lot, but knowing now the way she's changed from a negative edge character with a strong fireball game in 4 to a resource managing character with different special moves she could store in 5 gives me a lot of new context to view the character with. 6 spiced up a lot of the returning characters in numerous ways, and Juri is no exception, so let's take a look. First and foremost, Juri's 2 returning, non-Fuha based specials are the Pinwheel, functioning identically to its SF5 variant, horizontal light version, vertical medium and heavy versions, EX version is an invincible reversal. The other is the dive kick from SF4. It didn't disappear after 4, it just took a vacation and presumably paid the flip kick from 5 to act as a stand-in. It has a follow-up too, which disappointingly wasn't named after a past SF game like in 4. Hey, I said it wasn't clever, I didn't say it wasn't funny. As for her supers, her level 1 and 3 are both SF4 references. Level 1 references her super from SF4, and her level 3 is a cute throwback to her Ultra 2. There's a special surprise waiting for you in the Critical Art version that I'm sure all the true Juri fans will appreciate. The sole focus of the super, you could say. Level 2 is Feng Shui Engine, working as you'd expect and packing lots of oppressive pressure sequences, safe jumps, and sick combo extensions. So, the store mechanic. How has it been reshaped this time? Well, to start, the store special move in this game is called Fuhajin, just like in SF4, but there's still no negative edging. However, Juri also has her 3 release special moves that debuted in SF5. What Capcom has done here is effectively separate the store itself and the moves they gave Juri access to. Let's start with the actual Fuha release specials. The Fireball, the Axe Kick, and the Spin Kick return from 5 and all behave similarly to how they did before. The store, on the other hand, has its own input, which thank God means no overlap with any other specials. In prior appearances, every store basically had the same properties, frame data, damage, all that, but here they actually behave very differently based on the version used. The light store is the closest to previous games, where Juri simply kicks her leg up with faster startup than the others. The medium version has her take a step forward, making it a viable cancel option at a buttons, albeit one to be used cautiously since it's unsafe on block and easily punishable if not spaced properly. The heavy version takes a large step forward and has the slowest startup by far, as well as being the most unsafe on block, but it grants a juggle into her pinwheel afterward, so it's great in punish combos. I actually like this system more than SF5 because Juri can still use the store itself while gaining access to the resources the store grants, so she's a lot more consistent and versatile since she isn't as dependent on stocks for combos. I also think having access to all of her specials at any time makes her easier to learn for new players, as opposed to having to use some moves to unlock other moves. So Juri has the store and the specials she gained access to from the store in this game, but there's one major factor that differentiates them from how they worked in SF5. In SF5, she needed to perform the store before gaining access to the stored special moves. In SF6, she can use the Fireball, the Axe Kick, and the Spin Kick at any time, without even needing to touch the store special. So, okay, what's the point of storing then? Well, I'm glad you asked. Rather than using the store to gain access to more moves, Juri instead stores a new resource known as Fuha stocks, and what these stocks do is power up the 3 Fuha release specials. Anytime Juri has at least one stock, it'll be used to enhance the Fireball, the Axe Kick, and the Spin Kick, granting all 3 of them improved properties, and she can have up to 3 stocks at once. The Fireball without stocks is barely worthy of that name. It's still technically a projectile, beats level 1 supers and all, but the range is so pathetic it might as well just be a strike. With a stock, it turns into a proper Fireball, reminiscent of past games. By this point in time, any semblance of zoning in Juri's game plan is basically gone completely. For one, every character has access to Drive Impact and Drive Parry, 2 strong anti-fireball tools that force heavy caution when using any kind of projectile. Also, the actual Fireball is slower in terms of startup and recovery than it was in SF5. It's definitely more suited to being an approach tool, something she could always use the Fireball for, and which is undeniably solidified by the presence of Drive Rush, and Juri's Drive Rush is pretty good as you probably know. The Axe Kick is very similar with or without stocks, but the stocks do enhance the frame data on hit. Without a stock it's +5 on hit, but with the stock it's +8. This is great because it allows for a link into forward medium punch, which can be cancelled into the medium store, giving you back the stock you used in the combo itself. Finally, with the stock, the Spin Kick gains extra hits and more damage, making it an even better ender in general and for comboing into level 3 super. Recall that in SF5, the EX Fuha release didn't use any stores and was its own unique attack, separate from the other releases. SF6 opts for a different system where every release special has its own unique EX variant done with different button combinations. EX Fireball does 2 hits and knocks down on hit, as well as having faster startup and recovery. EX Axe Kick only becomes a little more plus on hit, and EX Spin Kick gets more hits and damage. The main appeal of these EX moves is that they do not consume stocks at all, allowing her to gain the benefits of the powered up versions of the release moves while preserving stocks, although this does come with the standard EX move cost of 2 bars of drive gauge. Like in SF5, Juri can chain the release moves together, with each cancel costing 1 stock. Also, how could I forget, Juri's level 1 super can be enhanced at the cost of 1 stock, going from 1800 damage to 2100. Once again, there's a heavy shift in Juri's playstyle here. The addition of Drive Rush now allows Juri a way to quickly get in the opponent's face, allowing her to close the distance and begin pressuring. With her +2 on block medium punch, she has very solid strike-throw mix, but like with SF5, this simplicity is accompanied by a need for resource management. It's not as bad as in SF5 because again, you have access to all your specials at all times, but like before, certain combos and Oki setups are only possible if you have stocks or a certain amount of them. With all that said, I think Juri in this game is a ton of fun, but I have seen her called boring by a fair amount of people, including some very good Juri players, and honestly I kinda understand. Now, I don't think she's boring to play at all, but her game plan and the way she approaches most matchups definitely makes her feel very one-dimensional. On the other hand, turning your brain off, drive rushing like a fucking maniac, and throw looping people is just fun. Sure, I'm not thinking much, but sometimes you just need a character that lets you turn your brain off. Speaking on Juri representation, it's been very strong, which makes sense given how good Juri was out the gate in this game, a far cry from SF5. She was the most represented character in the top 24 for CEO 2023, the first big SF6 tournament, before the Ken takeover. You have returning players from SF5 picking her up again like Justikid and II, Nephew, Mago, Zerna, Killzyu, Shivs, Chico, and of course the Capcom Cup champion himself, Uma. The Juri army is as strong as ever right now. If Juri can win $1 million at the highest level while still being common at lower levels with less experienced players, I think that's proof that this incarnation has been a rousing success. And thus, we have Juri Han. I went into this video aware of the fact that she was different in her pre-SF6 appearances, and actually taking a look at how she changed was really interesting. SF4 Juri in particular was a surprise. The whole negative edge fireball mechanic is something I find really fascinating. She's more similar between 5 and 6, but even then I think the changes they made to the Fuha system are really interesting and a great way to make her more accessible to people who are inevitably going to play her because they like the design. Ultimately, I think Juri is just cool, but what do you think? With how popular she is, she's definitely going to be a mainstay for years to come, so what's your preference? Would you prefer a return to the zoning fireball style of Juri, or are you more happy with the current Fuha system? Let me know. Thanks for watching, have a great night, and take care. Hey everyone, this is the part of the video where I thank all my amazing channel members, but before I do that, I have to give the biggest, hugest possible shoutouts to Synapse, who helped me out with this video in terms of notes for SF4 Juri and reading over the script. Thank you so much. I really can't even, put into words how thankful I am. I'll leave a link to his Twitter in the description, and thank you again, man. I really appreciate it. But anyway, time to thank my channel members. So thank you to Old Man Han, Cammy the Killer, Jazba, Mortis, Arg Seals, Wormy, Terry Hints, Perfect Orange, Pet Shop from Fortnite, Happy the Hap Hap, HPHK, Gundog92, Isaac the Collector, Gerald Say, Sonic Frontiers is a good game, Loop Zoopler, Loose, Kira the Stowaway, Raymond ZX200, and Basewire. There's a lot of you. Y'all are making this part of the video really hard. I'm just joking. Thank you all so much for the support. I really appreciate it. Sorry that this video took so long. I've been having so many technical issues over the past month, and it's made the process of completing any videos very difficult. I'll have more to say to this I'll probably make a community post about it, but yeah, it's been difficult. But thank you for bearing with me. This was a very, very, very fun video to make, and I hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you, and take care. And again, thank you all for the support.